Welcome to Sunday Sermons from the Williamsburg Community Chapel, brought to you by the Chapel Podcast Network. Let's grab our Bibles and open up to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 1 through 18. And I'll read verses 13 and 14 for us now, as we prepare to hear from lead pastor Travis Simone as he helps us continue in our current series titled, Life in Exile. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed.
The refrain of our Life in Exile series is this: dare to dance like Daniel. Dare to dance in Babylon. Dare to know what to reject and what to accept about your strange new home. Here's what I've learned about dancing in my life. It's exhausting. Now, I'm no Hunter Roo. There are no pictures of me with my feet in the air. If you were at the second service last week and didn't get to see that picture, make sure you go online and see that. I don't do a lot of dancing in my life, but there was one moment in my childhood where I got caught up with the music. I was at a Fish concert. There's a famous album called Hampton Comes Alive by Fish, and I was actually there when they recorded it. There is an unbelievable rendition. Oh, if you don't know who Fish is, I could be dating myself a little bit, the kids in the balcony. It's a jam band. They play long sets of music. People follow them all over to see their shows. They recorded this famous album just down the road in Hampton. They say they love playing there because it looks like a giant spaceship now. You'll never get that out of your brain when you drive past it on 64. There's an unbelievable version of Will Smith's Getting Jiggy with It that they covered that night. And again, dating myself here, my sort of Generation X roots, geriatric millennial, maybe, not sure. Somewhere in between. But Will Smith, after he did movies and before the incident at the Oscars, there were some late 90s rap hits. So you might want to check that out. And believe it or not, you go, what were you doing at a Fish show? Well, one of my youth leaders took me. His name was Keith Snyder. So parents, if you're concerned at all about the student ministry retreat, it could be much worse, okay? Much, much worse. I'm there with my youth leader, Keith Snyder, and we had worked our way all the way from the back on the floor of the Hampton Coliseum right up to the front. And Keith taught fifth grade in the Virginia Beach school system, was normally a reserved guy. I'd never seen him in an environment like this. And he just sort of lost himself to the music. I mean, the guy was just grooving. I was like, all right, okay. And I started dancing. And Fish shows are really long. They're so long, there's an intermission. And at intermission, we have sweated out so much. We are dying of thirst, but we were so impressed with how close we'd gotten our seats to the front of the stage. We thought, we can't leave, but we're so thirsty. I looked down. There's a group of hippies, dressed the way hippies dress, smelling the way hippies smell. They're passing a gallon of water around to each other. And much to my surprise, reserved fifth grade teacher Keith Snyder, youth leader Keith Snyder, reaches in and says, "Can I have some of that water?" Keith grabs the gallon of water, takes a sip, hands it to me. I take a sip, and as hard as that water was to drink, that water is what kept us dancing for the second half of the show. See, in Daniel 7, Daniel is at the halfway point of his dance. We're getting to the end of the book, but as Hunter mentioned last week, it's out of order. Chapter 7 is actually a flashback to stuff that happened earlier in Daniel's ministry. Look at the first verse. It's clear right there. Chapter 7, verse 1, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. See, chapter 7 is after Nebuchadnezzar, but before Darius and Cyrus. Babylon is no longer at the height of its power, but it has yet to fall to the Medes and the Persian Empire. And at the midway point of his exile, my guess is the dance, knowing what to accept and knowing what to reject, this dance that Daniel has been doing has left him exhausted. In chapter 1, just a brief review. In chapter 1, he vigilantly fought the identity Babylon tried to thrust on him. He said no to the food that would have given his boss the sense that he was ready to shift loyalty over to Nebuchadnezzar's regime. At the same time, he accepted the rigorous education of Babylon that required a constant parsing out of truth from lies, intelligent learning from religious idolatry. He also accepted a job with the king. This means he daily accepted the responsibility to uphold the values of the one true God of Israel as he worked alongside those who worshiped false gods. In chapter 2, the danger of working in Babylon becomes clear. Daniel comes within one answered prayer of death at the hands of a volatile king. In chapter 3, Daniel watched his 3 friends get thrown into a furnace. He had to dance calmly, clearly, and confidently, all while God chose not to save them from the furnace, but through the furnace. In chapter 5, Daniel has to tell a man who thought he was the most powerful man in the world that he had been weighed in the balances and found wanting. He said, "Your time is up. You stand on death's doorstep." That night, as he danced the dance of speaking truth to power, he watched the king he worked for, the king whose father had given him such a great job in Babylon. He watched him die at the hands of an invading army. In chapter 6, precisely because Daniel held loyalty to the one true God of Israel and commitment to the welfare of Babylon together so beautifully, a smear campaign is launched. A political hit job is executed, and Daniel spends the night in a den of hungry lions. You see, dancing like Daniel is exhausting. And so in the middle of the dance, at the intermission of the show, so to speak, the intermission of his time in Babylon, what does God do for this tired man? Daniel declared, verse 2, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up a great sea. And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another." God sends a vision to disturb Daniel's sleep. I wanted, as I was reading this week, I just wanted to yell at the Bible, "He's been through enough already, leave him alone. Just let the guy sleep." But instead of sleeping, God says, "Take a look, Daniel. Take a look at 3 grotesque beasts, and a 4th so disturbing it cannot even be likened to anything Daniel has seen on earth. The 4th beast has 10 horns. Then there's an 11th horn that shows up, and this horn speaks arrogantly." That's probably a more colloquial translation of the Aramaic phrase, "the mouth was speaking great things." He's speaking arrogantly. In front of this little brash talking horn, 3 of the bigger horns are plucked up by the roots. Now, in my role at the chapel, not only do I create sermon series and choose which biblical passages to teach on Sundays, it is my job to decide which of the pastors will preach which texts in any given series. So as I try to explain this, I have no one to blame but myself. We could have ended at chapter 6, but we press on. I thought I might be in real trouble this week when an author I usually find quite enlightening proposed that the 10 horns were likely prophecies about a 10-nation European Union. Only he was forced to admit a few paragraphs later that there are, well, obviously, more than 10 nations in the European Union. The good news is I don't have to try and explain this myself. And you don't have to wonder if I'm some second-rate prophecy hack guessing his way through this strange chapter of the Bible. A heavenly messenger tells Daniel exactly what the vision means. It's in verses 17 and 18. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. See, God originally intended to rule the world through the wise stewardship of his creation by his people. This is established in the earliest moments in biblical history. Genesis 1:27 and 1:28, when God creates humanity, we read these words. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have, here's the key, and have dominion. You're in charge. You're the rulers that I'm setting up in this world, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Instead of stewarding God's kingdom, we decided to build our own kingdoms. And what happens when we build our own kingdoms rather than stewarding God's kingdom is we become less than human. We become less than human because we have given up the purpose for which God created humanity. That is to rule, to exercise dominion in his kingdom. So when we build our own kingdoms, guess what happens? Beasts begin to rule. Things that are less than human begin to rule. You see, the 4 beasts are not necessarily 4 specific kings, but they are the pattern of all human rulers. In fact, all human leadership apart from God. The pattern of all human ambition, decoupled from seeing human dominion or leadership as a gift from God to wisely stewardship his creation. Why do I think these might not be necessarily 4 specific kings? Well, at the beginning of the passage, where do the beasts come from? They come from the 4 winds of the heavens. This is like 4 points on a compass. They come from the north, the south, the east, and the west. It's the vision saying to you, they came from every which direction. They came from everywhere. This is what happens when we give up our God-given vocation to rule as an exercise of stewardship of his kingdom, and we seek to create and build our own kingdoms. C.S. Lewis saw this clearly and put a subtle little hint into the beginning of his first book in the Chronicles of Narnia series, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that gets at this point. One of the main characters, Edmund, who's been making fun of his sister for claiming that she entered this magical land of Narnia through a wardrobe, he somehow stumbles through the wardrobe as well and meets the White Witch, the one ruler in Narnia who was attempting to rule on her own strength and power rather than according to God's strength and power. He meets the White Witch. He is told to go back to bring his brothers and sisters into the land that she might capture them. And as he goes back, after having spent time with the White Witch, now on her agenda, not God's agenda, C.S. Lewis says he looked different. As his brothers and sisters talked to him, they kept saying, Edmund, you look strange. You don't quite look like Edmund. It's that subtle nod that when we go after the building of our own kingdom, we start looking different, less than human, in the language of Daniel, beastly. And in Daniel chapter 7, verses 17 through 18, what we learn is that though the nations rage and evil rulers reign for a time, God's intention remains, and God will have his way. The interpretation of the vision is this: the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. It is as if God is saying to Daniel, exhausted by living under one of the most beastly regimes in the history of the world, hey, Daniel, keep on dancing. Keep on dancing, Daniel. Because dancing in Babylon will eventually lead to dominion in an everlasting kingdom. Daniel, keep on dancing. So instead of a gallon of water to share with hippies and your student ministry leader, Daniel is given a vision of the end. God gives Daniel a vision of the end of the beasts. God gives Daniel a vision of how he intends to rule the world once again. God gives Daniel this vision as a reminder, as an encouragement. Hey, Daniel, keep on dancing. And so my question this morning for all of us is, has daring to dance like Daniel left you exhausted? Has daring to dance in Babylon left you tired, angry, frustrated? Has the complexity of discerning what to reject and what to accept about your strange new home led to mental fatigue or even a sense of the impossibility of it all? Maybe you've met obstacles seeking the welfare of Babylon, and these obstacles have led to discouragement or maybe even just a desire to quit and live just for you. Have you ever given sacrificially only to not see the improvements you were hoping for? Are you concerned about your kids as they attend Babylonian schools, learning, as Daniel did, the literature and language of Babylon? Have you ever forgiven someone only to feel like they took advantage of you? If in any way, shape, or form you are considering walking away from living faithfully within, not apart from, but living faithfully within exile, God has a vision for you in Daniel chapter 7. And the vision's message is clear. Dancing in Babylon will lead to dominion in an everlasting kingdom. So keep on dancing. I think the passage also provides us with three practices to keep us out on the dance floor in Babylon. Three practices to keep discouragement at bay. Here they are. keep looking, keep waiting, and keep asking. To keep on dancing, we've got to keep looking, keep waiting, and keep asking. First, keep looking. The most repeated phrase of Daniel 7 is, I looked. You can see it there in verse 4, 6, 9. It's twice in verse 11. It's also in verse 21, and I missed it on the slide because I just found it this morning. Also in verse 13, it's just translated a little bit differently. Daniel says over and over again, I looked, I looked, I looked. See, Daniel looked when the wings were plucked off the lion. Daniel looked when the leopard with 4 heads appeared. Daniel looks when the 3 horns are plucked up before the little horn, and he's still looking when he notices the little horn has human eyes and a human mouth that enables it to speak arrogantly. Now notice there are 4 beasts, 1 too terrible to identify, and 1, the leopard, has 4 heads. So 4 beasts, 1 with 4 heads. So 3 beasts, 1 head, 1 beast with 4 heads. This means he sees 7 beastly heads. And again, this is biblical imagery and visions. 7 is the biblical number for what? Perfection, completeness. Again, this is what partly leads me to believe these don't have to be 4 literal kings that we have to search the history books to find out. There's 7 heads. It's horror perfected. It's disgust perfected. It's evil perfected. It's complete evil that Daniel sees. And how easy it would have been in this moment for him to do what? Look away. Why? Why keep looking? Look away. This is horrible. But look at verse 9. As I looked, as he looks at the 7 beastly heads, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. In the midst of it all, God shows up. It's like Daniel now has the ultimate split screen. You know, if you have YouTube TV, you can now watch like 4 games at once. You got split screen TVs. You got all kinds of things happening all at the same time. So often, all we do is focus on the evil that we see in this world. And all of a sudden, God splits the screen for Daniel. He sees the evil in this world to its maximum capacity. And then God splits the screen and says, there's something else to look at, Daniel. Look over here. I look, Daniel said. He keeps looking, and what he sees is nothing less than God show up in the midst of it all. And then look at what happens in verse 11. Again, the phrase repeated, I looked then because of the sound of the great or arrogant or boastful words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. Too many of us are turning away from the evil that we see in Babylon so that we miss what God is doing and what God will do ultimately with all of the evil and arrogance of our world. It's like just a moment. In a moment, God takes the beast. There's not a lot of narration, not a lot of fanfare, and the beast is killed. And note, it's thrown into fire. Remember in Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown in fire. They are not burned. They are the saints of the Most High that will have dominion forever and ever. And here, this beast in the fire, done, gone, over with. Instead of fighting against Babylon, floating along with what's going on in Babylon or fleeing from Babylon, or really what I hear a lot lately is people who are fearful of Babylon. Keep looking. for what God is up to in Babylon. If you want to keep dancing, keep looking and keep waiting. Look at verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. They have no more authority, no more power, yet they still do exist and maybe cause a little trouble every now and then. This brings me back to the first and last verse of Daniel chapter 1. I highlighted this in the first week of our series. Daniel provides some very precise dates. And I love in Daniel 1, you learn that Daniel goes to Babylon in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. He leaves Babylon in the 1st year of King Cyrus of Persia. And what I said in that sermon was, what this means is Daniel is the first man into Babylon and the last man out. The deportation of Babylon took place over about a decade, maybe a decade plus. It started with just a shot over the bow by Nebuchadnezzar, taking a few young people from the royal line and saying, we're going to make them good Babylonians. And Daniel was a part of that group in about 605 BC. Cyrus takes over in 532 BC. 73 years Daniel waited. And in the middle of his waiting, remember, this is the middle king in the story of Daniel. In the middle of all his waiting, God reveals to him the fate of the beasts. So he knows the fate of the beasts, but he's not out of Babylon yet. He's got to wait for God's timing. Their lives go on. The beasts' lives go on, but their dominion is gone. Reminds me of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. Those who wait for the Lord renew their strength. They're the ones that shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. If you want to keep dancing, keep waiting and keep asking. Look at verses 15 and 16 with me. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of things. Daniel is anxious. Daniel is alarmed. So what does he do? He approaches a heavenly messenger and asks, what is going on here? Note the only reason he gets an interpretation of the vision is because he asked for an interpretation of the vision. And what I love is he doesn't stop asking questions after he gets the initial interpretation. This is just beyond our reading in verse 19. Our reading stopped in verse 18. In verse 19, we read this: Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest. Daniel's got more questions. And he starts asking the heavenly messenger about this fourth beast. When we are confused by life in Babylon, when life in Babylon feels too complex, when we can't figure out what to reject and what to accept, when we wonder what God is up to and how this will all end, keep asking questions. And the best way to keep asking is to keep praying. Remember last week when the decree went out that Daniel was no longer allowed to pray to the one true God of Israel, Daniel opened his window, turned toward Jerusalem, and he prayed, and Hunter brought out that great insight from the text. He prayed as he had done previously. He didn't start praying because of the emergency edict. He prayed as he had done previously. It was part of his daily routine. Likely the reason Daniel kept asking questions, even when the vision was at its most disturbing, was because Daniel spent a lifetime talking to God and asking questions about faithfulness in exile through prayer. The chapter ends like this in verse 28. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my mind. Another translation is, I kept thinking about it. Daniel kept mulling over what he saw, asking questions until he gained deeper understanding. And it is in asking the second question about the fourth beast that Daniel gets the most important insight of all. In the vision, the Son of Man is given an everlasting dominion, a kingdom that will not be destroyed. In the interpretation, Daniel is told that the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. So do you see the discrepancy? The vision, the Son of Man receives the kingdom. The interpretation, the saints of the Most High receive the kingdom. So in the interpretation, the Son of Man appears to be some kind of representation of the saints. Until Daniel asks the second question and gets more information. Now listen carefully to verse 27. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. The kingdom is given to the people, but his kingdom. So what is it? Is the Son of Man a single person or the personification of the saints? And you don't know the answer to that question until a man named Jesus of Nazareth shows up on the scene and starts referring to himself strangely, mysteriously as the Son of Man. It was his favorite title for himself. Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man 80 plus times in the four Gospels. Just a taste. In Mark chapter 2, he says, but that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralytic, I say to you, rise, pick up your bed and go home. And he rose immediately. Jesus is saying, I am the Son of Man. I'm the one with the real authority that can never be taken away. In Mark 10, verse 45, Jesus says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus says, I am the Son of Man. I am the one who gives my life to defeat the beasts who rule over your lives. And then most importantly, in Matthew chapter 26, verses 63 through 66, Jesus says this, or it says this, and then Jesus will respond. But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment? And they answered, he deserves death. It was Jesus' self-identification as the Son of Man from Daniel 7 that signs his death warrant. And on the cross, Jesus does battle with the ultimate beast, the beast of sin. And in death, Jesus takes on its ultimate consequence from inside the belly of the beast. Rising to new life, he leads all who put their trust in him into an everlasting kingdom, calling on them to begin building that kingdom now on earth as it has already been built in heaven. So now ask yourself, how can Daniel 7:27 be true? And the dominion and the kingdom and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. How can those two things go together? The Apostle Paul saw this very clearly. And in Romans 8:17, he writes, "Now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory." We are co-heirs with Christ. That's how the interpretation of the dream can say, the saints of the Most High, they get to possess the kingdom. And then the additional interpretation can say, it's his kingdom. Because through placing our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we become co-heirs with him in the one true kingdom that will last. Co-heirs with Christ. That's the Apostle Paul's way of saying what we've learned today from Daniel 7. Dancing in Babylon leads to dominion in an eternal kingdom. So keep on dancing.
Thank you for joining us today. Here at the Williamsburg Community Chapel, we are all about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we hope you will join us this year as we study the biblical theme of exile and learn how to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land.